snow did not fall gently on the Blackwood estate. It attacked. It came in sharp, horizontal spears, rattling the leaded glass of the motor car and obscuring the skeletal trees that lined the long, winding drive to the manor. Mr. Alist Conditioner Finch, photographer, clutched his heavy oak camera case, the brass clasps cold enough to sting his leather-gloved fingers. It was December 23, 1913, and the weather was, as the papers put it, most beastly. Finch was a man of science and mechanics. He trusted emulsion, silver halide, and the precise click of his shutter. He did not trust atmospheres, yet the atmosphere at Shadowbrook Manor was undeniably heavy. The house itself did not loom. It hunched. Built of dark, soot-stained granite, it seemed to actively absorb the weak winter light, giving nothing back. He was met at the door not by a cheerful maid humming a carol, but by a stern, silent butler named Graves, whose face looked as though it had been carved from old soap. "Mr. Finch, you are expected," Graves intoned, his voice a dry rustle. "The family is assembling in the great hall. Follow me, and wipe your boots thoroughly. The mistress is particular." Finch did so, scraping the slush from his soles onto the imposing iron grate. The entryway was vast and cold, dominated by a staircase that seemed too large for the space, its carved oak newel posts culminating in the heads of weeping cherubs. The air smelled of old wood, floor polish, and something else, something vaguely metallic and sweet, like stale lilies. He was led to the great hall, a room clearly intended to impress, but which only managed to oppress. A fireplace large enough to roast an ox gaped at one end, yet the fire within seemed to offer no warmth, only a flickering, anxious light. The Blackwood family was arranged near it, static and waiting. Arthur Blackwood stood center, the patriarch. He was a thick-set man with a groomed beard and eyes that calculated rather than saw. His wealth came from shipping and industry, and he looked as though he were forged from the same iron. Beside him, perched on a severe velvet settee, was his wife, Eleanor. She was a pale, thin woman, draped in expensive lace that looked like a spider's web. She clutched a lace handkerchief, and her eyes darted constantly from Finch to the windows, to the shadows in the high corners of the ceiling. Alistair, the heir, stood by the mantelpiece, affecting an air of boredom. At 18, he was all long limbs and tailored wool, his hair slicked back. He tapped a cigarette on a silver case, waiting for this dreary domestic ritual to conclude. And then there was Ilara. She sat on a low stool slightly apart from the others, near the towering, heavily decorated Christmas tree. She was 16. Where the others were rigid, Ilara was still, utterly, unnervingly still. She wore a dark green velvet dress, and her black hair was pulled back tightly. She was not looking at Finch, or the fire, or her family. She was staring at the topmost ornament on the tree, a tarnished silver angel, watching it with a quiet, unsettling intensity. "Mr. Finch," Arthur Blackwood barked, breaking the silence. "You come highly recommended. I expect efficiency. I want the definitive Blackwood Christmas portrait, a testament to the season, to permanence." "Of course, Mr. Blackwood, if you would," Finch said, moving into his professional demeanor. He began setting up his tripod, the heavy mahogany legs clicking firmly onto the parquet floor. "Madam," he gestured to Eleanor, "perhaps a slightly more relaxed posture. And the young master, if you could stand just behind your father's right shoulder." Alistair sighed, a plume of smoke escaping his lips. "Must we, father? It's positively archaic." "We must," Arthur stated. "It is tradition." "Ilara, stop staring at that infernal tree and look toward the camera." Ilara's head turned. It did not turn quickly or slowly, but smoothly, as if pulled by a string. Her eyes met Finch's, and he felt a jolt. They were lovely eyes, a deep, clear gray, but they were as cold and empty as the view from his motor car. There was no defiance in them, no teenage sulkiness. There was nothing. "Splendid," Finch murmured, hiding his discomfort. He moved Ilara slightly, placing her hand on the arm of her mother's settee. The girl's skin looked porcelain white against the dark velvet. He worked for 10 minutes adjusting the gas lamps, positioning a reflector screen to bounce the weak firelight. The family endured it with stiff resignation. "Now," Finch said, ducking under the black cloth at the back of his view camera. He adjusted the focus, the inverted image of the family sharpening on the ground glass. "We will need absolute stillness. The exposure will be brief, thanks to the flash, but any movement at the moment of ignition will result in a blur. A ghost, if you will." Eleanor Blackwood visibly shivered, her handkerchief rising to her lips. "Hold this, please," Finch said, emerging. He handed Alistair the end of a long rubber tube connected to the shutter. "When I count to 3, squeeze the bulb firmly, then release." He moved to his flash tray, a small metal pan on a stand. He poured a careful measure of magnesium powder into it. "Keep your eyes on me," he instructed the family. "Do not blink at the flash if you can help it." "Ready?" He saw 4 rigid figures: Arthur, stern; Eleanor, terrified; Alistair, bored; and Alara, watching him with that dreadful, hollow calm. 1, 2, 3. Alistair squeezed. Finch sparked the powder. The world vanished in a silent, blinding explosion of white light. A dense cloud of acrid, metallic smoke instantly filled the room. Eleanor screamed, a short, sharp sound, and the smell of burnt magnesium stung Finch's nostrils. "Excellent," Finch said, capping his lens. He quickly removed the heavy glass plate holder. "The sitting is concluded. I shall have the proofs delivered by tomorrow evening, Christmas Eve." "See that you do," Arthur said, already turning away. As Finch packed his gear, shielded by the lingering smoke, he saw Alara. She had not moved. She was still smiling, a tiny, faint smile directed at the spot where the flash had been, as if she had enjoyed the sudden, violent light. Mr. Finch's studio in the town of Bramford was his sanctuary. It was a place of chemical precision and predictable outcomes. Here, he was master. The smells of acetic acid and fixer were his incense, the dim ruby glow of the safe light his comfort. He locked the door, the memory of Shadowbrook Manor clinging to him like its damp cold. He wanted nothing more than to process the plate, finish the job, and wash his hands of the entire Blackwood family. They were, in the vernacular of the day, a queer lot. He worked with practiced ease. In the total darkness, he slid the heavy 8x10 glass plate negative from its holder. He felt the smooth, cold emulsion with his fingertips, navigating by touch alone. He submerged it in the developer tray, the liquid cool against his skin. He began to rock the tray gently, rhythmically, counting the seconds in his head. 1 1,000, 2 1,000. He thought of the family, of Arthur's demanding stare, of Eleanor's bird-like fragility, of Alistair's casual disdain, and of Alara. He kept seeing her eyes, those placid gray voids staring into the flash. Most subjects flinched, squinted, or looked away. She had not. At the prescribed time, he lifted the plate, letting the developer drip, and plunged it into the acidic stop bath. The chemical tang hit his nose, then into the fixer. Only now was it safe to turn on the ruby light. He held the plate up to the dim red glow. The image was emerging, the tones reversed. The dark suits were milky white, the pale faces dark gray. It was a perfect exposure. The flash had frozen them. No blur, no ghosts. Arthur Blackwood would be pleased. Finch let it fix for the full 10 minutes, then moved it to the washing bath, the clean, cold water rinsing away the last of the chemicals. He turned on the main gas light, the mantle hissing to life and flooding the small room with yellow light. He clipped the heavy glass plate to a wire to dry, grabbing a towel for his hands. He felt the relief of a job well done. He'd print it in the morning, mount it on heavy card, and collect his rather handsome fee. He busied himself cleaning his trays, the plate dripping silently in the corner. An hour later, it was dry to the touch. Before storing it, he held it up to the light for a final inspection, just as a carpenter might check a joint. The family stared back at him, their faces dark, their clothes light. The detail was exquisite. He could see the lace pattern on Eleanor's dress, the signet ring on Arthur's finger, the perfect part in Alistair's hair. He saw Alara, her small, placid smile. He brought the plate closer. Something was wrong. It was a small detail, easily missed. A flaw in the emulsion, perhaps? A speck of dust on the lens that he had somehow missed? He reached for his jeweler's loupe, the small, powerful magnifying glass he used for checking focus and spotting imperfections. He placed it against the glass, focusing on the dark shape of Ilara's face. His breath caught. He pulled the loupe away, wiped it on his sleeve, and looked again. His eye pressed hard against the metal. The flash had been blinding. In such bright, direct light, the pupils should have contracted to pinpricks. They would be tiny black dots in the center of her gray irises. He looked closer. There were no pupils. There were no irises. In the photograph, on the glass plate negative, Ilara Blackwood's eyes were not gray. They were solid, uniform black. They were not reflective, like glass, but flat, like pits. They were perfect, lightless voids that had somehow, impossibly, been captured on his emulsion. "A chemical flaw," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Reticulation. The developer was too cold." But he knew it was a lie. The rest of the plate was perfect. The grain was fine. The tones were flawless. He backed away from the drying line, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the negative from across the room. From there, it was just a family. Stern, cold, but normal. But up close, under the lens, Finch, a man of science, suddenly felt a very unscientific chill. He looked at the door, half expecting to see one of those empty gray eyes staring back at him through the keyhole. He quickly covered the plate with a dark cloth, his hands shaking. Finch did not sleep. He sat in his studio, the gas lamp hissing, staring at the cloth-draped negative. His mind raced, cataloging every possible explanation. It could be halation, a light bleed from the flash, but that would create a halo, not fill the sockets. It could be a development error, but it was too localized. It was as if the silver halide emulsion itself had refused to record the light reflecting from her eyes, and had simply, unanimously, turned black. He spent the dark hours of the morning pacing. He was a tradesman. His reputation depended on delivering a perfect product. Delivering this was impossible. Arthur Blackwood would accuse him of incompetence, or worse, some grotesque artistic mockery. He would be ruined. By the time a weak gray dawn broke on Christmas Eve, Finch had a plan. It was dishonest, but necessary. He would claim the plate was flawed. He would go back and take another. But first, he had to be sure. With trembling hands, he took the negative to his printing station. He placed it in the contact printing frame, laid a sheet of silver gelatin paper on top, and clamped it shut. He exposed it to his printing light, then ran the paper through the developer, stop, and fixer. He watched in the tray as the image resolved, this time in its proper positive form. The dark suits were now dark, the faces pale. He pulled the print from the fixer, his tongs clattering. He held the wet, dripping paper up to the light. It was worse. In the negative, the eyes were black pits. In the positive print, they were still black pits. Pure, flat, absolute black, like 2 drops of India ink spilled onto her face. They stared out from the paper, absorbing the light of the room, possessing an awful flat presence. He dropped the print into the wash bin as if it were hot. He grabbed his coat. He could not, he realized, simply claim the plate broke. He had to show them a print. But he couldn't show them this. He returned to the darkroom and with a heavy heart took out his retouching kit. He grabbed the negative and a fine-tipped brush. For the next 2 hours, Finch, a man who prided himself on capturing reality, committed a fraud. He painstakingly painted onto the glass negative, dot by dot, a pair of new eyes onto Ilara. He added tiny white catchlights to mimic the flash. The result was passable, but grotesque in its own way. The painted eyes were glassy, dead, and didn't match the angle of the light. They looked like the eyes of a porcelain doll. But they were, at least, not the pits. He made a new print from the doctored negative. It looked stiff, artificial, but plausible. He mounted it, packed his gear, and headed back to Shadowbrook Manor, the original undoctored negative tucked deep in his case, a secret weight of glass and dread. The snow had stopped, but the cold had deepened, sinking into the very bones of the world. When Graves opened the door, his expression was, if possible, even more sour. "Mr. Finch, you are early." "I have the proof, Graves," Finch said, trying to sound professional. "But I also have concerns." I must speak with the master. He was shown into Arthur Blackwood's study, a room paneled in dark, almost black mahogany, smelling of cigar smoke and old leather. Arthur was at his desk, scrawling figures in a ledger. "Well?" Blackwood did not look up. "Sir, I have the proof print as requested." Finch laid the mounted photograph on the desk. Blackwood grunted. He picked it up, holding it at arm's length. Finch watched his face, praying the clumsy retouching would pass. "It is acceptable," Blackwood said after a long silence. He squinted. "My daughter looks unwell. Her eyes." "That is precisely my concern, sir," Finch lied quickly. "I believe the girl, Miss Ilara. I believe she blinked, or perhaps the flash startled her. It has created a most unfortunate dead eye effect. Furthermore, there was a slight chemical fogging on the plate." He pointed to a corner he had deliberately smudged. "It is not up to my standard, sir, and not, I think, to yours." Blackwood looked from the photo to Finch. "You are saying this is inadequate?" "I am saying, sir, that for the Blackwood Christmas portrait, adequate is not sufficient." "I came prepared to reshoot the plate. At no extra charge, of course. I wish for it to be perfect." Arthur stared at the print again, his gaze lingering on Ilara's painted-on eyes. Finch felt a drop of sweat roll down his spine. "Very well, Mr. Finch," Arthur said, tossing the print back onto the desk. "Your standards are commendable. Graves, assemble the family." Again. The mood in the great hall was fractured. Eleanor looked as if she had been weeping. Alistair was openly hostile, pacing by the window. A whole bloody charade all over again. It's madness. Ilara was in the same spot, on the same stool, wearing a different dress, this one a deep, unsettling blue. She was, as before, staring at the tree. "Ilara," Arthur snapped. "Attend the photographer." Her head turned, that same smooth, rotational movement. She looked at Finch. He felt his stomach clench. He could still see the black pits from the negative, and for a terrifying second, he imagined he could see them on her real face, a shadow passing over her gray eyes. "We will be quick," Finch announced, his voice strained. He set up his tripod, his hands fumbling with the brass knobs. He felt observed, not just by the family, but by the house itself. The portraits on the walls, dark-clad ancestors, seemed to be watching him. The air was thick and still. "Positions, please," as before. They moved like automatons. Arthur, stern. Eleanor, trembling. Alistair, simmering with resentment. Ilara, placid. Finch ducked under the cloth. He focused the lens. The family swam into view on the ground glass. He checked Ilara first. On the frosted glass, she looked normal. Gray eyes, pale skin. He felt a wave of relief. It must have been a fluke, a one-in-a-million chemical accident. "Still, please," he called out, his voice muffled by the cloth. He inserted the new glass plate holder. "We will use the flash again. Prepare yourselves." He emerged, prepared the magnesium powder, and looked at his subjects. "Ilara," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. "Look directly at the lens, and please, child, do not blink." She smiled. It was the same faint, knowing smile from the day before. "Ready?" Finch said, bracing himself. 1, 2, 3. The flash ignited. The room vanished in white. Eleanor cried out. The smoke billowed, thick and chemical. "Done," Finch said, quickly securing the plate holder. "This, I am certain, will be the one." He packed his equipment with frantic speed. He needed to be away from that house, away from that girl. As he was clasping his case, he felt a presence. Ilara was standing beside him. She had moved without a sound. "You don't like our house, Mr. Finch," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, yet it cut through the room. "It's a very grand house, Miss Blackwood," Finch stammered, not looking at her. "It's hungry," she whispered. "It's always so hungry at Christmas." Finch froze. He looked up. She was staring at his camera case, where the new unexposed plate lay. "Ilara, away from the man's equipment," Arthur commanded. She didn't look at her father. She just smiled at the case, then turned and glided back to her stool by the tree. Finch grabbed his things and, bowing stiffly, all but ran from the room. Back in the safety of his darkroom, Finch developed the second plate with a sense of grim determination. He would not be fooled this time. He would not see anomalies that weren't there. He was a scientist. He went through the motions. Developer, stop, fix. He counted the seconds aloud, grounding himself in the familiar process. When he finally pulled the second negative from the wash and held it to the light, he almost wept with relief. It was perfect. He checked with his loupe immediately. Alara's eyes were there. Irises, pupils, even a tiny, sharp catchlight from the flash. Everything was exactly as it should be. The girl had clear, normal, human eyes. A fluke, he said aloud, the word echoing in the small room. A chemical smear, dust, anything. He had been terrified by a shadow, a simple technical error. He felt foolish, but the relief was overwhelming. The first plate, the one with the black pits, he wrapped in cloth and buried at the bottom of a little used chemical chest. A mistake to be forgotten. He worked through the night, energized. He made a beautiful print from the new negative. The family was sharp, the contrast perfect. It was a portrait of distinction, exactly what Arthur Blackwood had ordered. He matted it in heavy, embossed card, wrapped it in tissue, and dispatched it to the manor via courier on Christmas Eve morning, with his invoice attached. The rest of the day, Finch busied himself. He tidied his studio. He bought a small goose for his solitary Christmas dinner. He tried pointedly not to think of Shadowbrook or the hungry house or the girl's whisper. He had delivered the product. His business was concluded. That evening, as dusk settled and the first carolers began to make their rounds, a violent knocking echoed through his shop. Finch opened the door to find Arthur Blackwood on his step. Blackwood was not wearing a hat. His face was pale, his beard uncharacteristically unkempt. He was clutching a small, leather-bound object in his fist. "Mr. Blackwood, is something wrong with the print?" "Wrong?" Blackwood pushed past him into the shop, his eyes wild. "You dare ask me what is wrong? You, sir, are either a charlatan or a lunatic." I don't understand, sir. The print was perfect." "The print," Blackwood spat, "is a monstrosity. I looked at it. At first it seemed fine. Stiff, but fine. But I am a man who appreciates detail, Mr. Finch. I look at my ledgers. I look at my shipping manifests. And I look at my family." He slammed the object he was holding onto Finch's counter. It was a heavy brass magnifying glass, the kind used for reading maps. "I use this," Blackwood hissed. "I wanted to admire the detail on my wife's brooch." "And?" Finch whispered, his blood turning to ice. "And I saw it. You thought you were clever, didn't you? With your paint and your little white dots." "Sir, You did not use the second plate, did you?" Blackwood roared, his voice cracking. "You used the first one, the one you doctored, the one you lied about. You delivered the print with the painted eyes." Finch stumbled back. No, that cannot be. I printed the second negative, the one from yesterday. It was perfect. I destroyed the first." He lied again, a desperate, clumsy lie. "You lie!" Blackwood snatched the discarded, retouched print from Finch's work table, the one Blackwood himself had brought back. "This is what you sent me. Look at it. Look at her doll's eyes. Why? Why would you do this? Was it a joke? To mock my family?" Finch stared at the print. Blackwood was right. This was the print from the first negative, the one he had clumsily retouched. But how? He had printed the second plate. He knew he had. Had he mixed them up? In his relief, had he grabbed the wrong negative to print from? "It was a mistake," Finch pleaded. "A darkroom error. I have the other negative. The good one. I can make a new print tonight. It will be ready by morning. By Christmas." Blackwood's breathing was heavy. He seemed to be fighting for control. "You have the other one. The second plate. You are certain it is normal?" Yes, I swear it," Finch said, scrambling to his chemical chest. "Then show me," Blackwood commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Show me the negative, now. Before I call the constable and have you arrested for fraud and harassment." The dark room felt like a tomb. The ruby light cast grotesque shadows, turning Arthur Blackwood's face into a crimson mask of fury. "Where is it, Finch?" "Here, sir, in the drying rack. I must have printed the wrong one in my haste." Finch's hands were shaking so badly he could barely unclip the glass plate. He presented it to Blackwood, holding it by the edges. "See, this is the plate from the second sitting." Blackwood snatched it. He held it up to the safe light, ignoring Finch's cry that it wasn't fully fixed, a lie to cover his terror. "Bring that thing," Blackwood ordered, pointing to the jeweler's loop. Finch handed it to him. Blackwood, a man of industry, pressed the loop to his eye and scrutinized the negative of his daughter. The silence stretched, broken only by the drip of water from a tap. "It is as you said," Blackwood breathed, his voice hollow. He lowered the plate. "Her eyes are normal. The pupil is visible." He looked at Finch, his gaze piercing. "Then what was the first plate? What did you see that made you paint over it?" Finch, trapped, saw no way out but the truth. "It was a flaw, sir. A terrible flaw. I feared you would think. I don't know what I feared." "Show me." "Sir, I threw it out. The glass was reclaimed." "You are lying again, Mr. Finch. I can see it in your wretched face. Find it." Defeated, Finch walked to the chemical chest in the outer room. He dug beneath boxes of developer powder and tins of fixer. His fingers brushed the cloth-wrapped square. He pulled it out, the glass heavy in his hand, as if weighted with more than just its own mass. He brought it back into the dark room. He and Blackwood stood there, two men illuminated in red, holding two nearly identical portraits of the same family. "The original," Finch whispered, handing it over. Blackwood held it up to the light, side by side with the second plate. "They are identical. The posture, the lighting." "Of course," Finch said. "I modeled the second sitting precisely on the first." "No," Blackwood said. He pressed his loop to the first plate, the true one. His body went rigid. He made a low, strangled sound, half groan, half gasp. "What did you see, Finch?" Blackwood whispered, not looking away from the glass. "Her eyes, sir. They were empty, black, like pits." "Yes," Blackwood confirmed, his voice barely audible. "Pits, that is the word." He pulled the loop away, his hand shaking violently, the glass plate rattling. "But you missed something, you fool. You were so focused on her eyes." "What? What do you mean?" "Look again. Look at the wallpaper." Finch took the plate. He pressed his own loop to the glass, his eye finding the patch of patterned wallpaper directly behind Alara's head. The wallpaper in the great hall was a complex floral damask. He remembered it clearly. In the photograph, in the tiny magnified portion of the negative, the pattern was wrong. The flowers were not flowers. They were faces, tiny screaming faces, writhing and swirling in the pattern, and the vines that connected them looked less like flora and more like intertwined skeletal arms. "My God," Finch breathed, stumbling back, dropping the loop. "It is not on the second plate," Blackwood said, his voice dead. He was holding the other negative, the good one. "I have just checked. On this one, it is merely wallpaper." He tapped the first plate. "But on this one shows that. It is a trick of the light, an artifact, as were her eyes, I suppose." Blackwood snarled. "You, sir, have brought a curse into my house." "I brought nothing," Finch cried, indignant. "I brought a camera, a machine. It captures what is there. If that is on the plate, it is because it was in your hall." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Blackwood stared at the negative, the one with the screaming faces, his mind clearly racing. "You will destroy this," Blackwood said finally, handing the plate to Finch. "You will destroy it now. You will shatter it, grind it to dust, and dissolve it in acid. And the other one, the good one? Print it," Blackwood ordered. "Print it and deliver it tomorrow, Christmas Day. It will be our family portrait. It will be permanent. This other, it was a shadow, a mistake. It never happened." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And you, mister?" "Finch will never speak of what you saw on this plate to anyone. If you do, I will not have you arrested for fraud. I will have you committed to the asylum. Am I understood?" Finch, holding the cursed glass, could only nod. Blackwood left, slamming the door, leaving Finch alone in the red light with the impossible truth. Christmas Eve at Shadowbrook was a silent affair. Arthur Blackwood returned to the manor well after midnight, his face a mask of iron. He found his wife, Eleanor, asleep in a chair by the dying fire in her bedroom, a rosary tangled in her fingers. He did not wake her. He went to his study and locked the door. He poured a large brandy, but the alcohol did not warm him. He kept seeing the magnified negative, the screaming faces in the damask, the black pits of his daughter's eyes. He had lied to Finch. He had not, in fact, used his magnifying glass on the retouched print. He had been standing in the great hall, holding the print Finch had delivered, when Alara had come to stand beside him. "It's not very good, is it, Father?" she had asked, her voice that same placid whisper. "He made my eyes look like a doll's." He said you blinked, Alara," Arthur had stammered. "Oh, no," she had replied, smiling up at him. "I didn't blink. He just didn't like what he saw. He saw the truth, and he covered it up." That is when Arthur had run from the house clutching the print, his heart a cold stone of dread. He knew, even before he confronted the photographer, that Finch had seen something terrible. Now, sitting in his study, he listened. The house was usually silent at night, save for the groan of the settling timbers and the whistle of the wind. Tonight, he heard something new. It was a sound from within the walls, a faint, dry skittering, like dry leaves blown across a floor, or the movement of some large, brittle insect. He told himself it was the pipes, or rats, but the sound seemed to move, traveling from the fireplace, up toward the ceiling, in the direction of Alara's room, which was directly above his study. He tried to focus on his ledgers, permanence, legacy, the things he believed in, but the numbers swam. All he could see were the screaming faces in the wallpaper. He realized with a lurch that the wallpaper in his study was the exact same pattern as the one in the great hall. He grabbed his desk lamp, an electric one, he was a modern man after all, and held it close to the wall. He stared, his eyes burning, until the floral pattern blurred. He saw nothing, just flowers, just vines. He was letting the photographer's chicanery unnerve him. The skittering sound came again, louder this time, seemingly just behind the plaster. It was followed by a sharp drop in temperature. The study became frigid, the breath pluming from his mouth. The fire in his grate guttered, the flames turning a sickly, low blue as if starved of air. And then he heard his daughter, in the room above, begin to hum. It was not a carol. It was a low, monotonous, tuneless sound, a vibration that he felt in his teeth more than he heard with his ears. Arthur Blackwood, a man of iron and industry, pulled his chair away from the wall and did not move again until dawn. Eleanor Blackwood had always been a woman of delicate sensibilities. She managed her house through a haze of laudanum and religious devotion. She knew her husband viewed her as fragile, and her son viewed her as a nuisance. But she was not stupid. She was, however, terrified. She had felt the change in Shadowbrook. It had begun subtly, months ago. It started with the servants. 3 maids had quit in as many weeks. The first claimed she kept seeing a tall man in shadows in the upper hallway. The second complained of the cold, a pervasive, damp chill that no fire could touch. The third, a young Irish girl, had fled in hysterics, claiming she had entered Alara's room to turn down the bed, only to find the girl sitting in the dark, speaking in a voice that was not her own, a deep, resonant rumble. Eleanor had dismissed it as girlish fancy, an Irish superstition. But then the smells had started. The house, which always smelled of polish and coal smoke, now carried a new odor. It was the scent of lilies, but not fresh, fragrant lilies. It was the cloying, sweet, metallic smell of lilies that had been sitting in stagnant water for a week. The smell of decay, masked by perfume. It was strongest near Alara's door. On Christmas morning, Eleanor woke with a gasp, the rosary clutched to her chest. Arthur was not in bed. She dressed quickly, her hands trembling, and went downstairs. The house was silent. No servants were preparing the Christmas feast. Graves, the butler, stood like a statue in the foyer. "Graves, where is the kitchen staff? Where is cook?" "They have left, madam," Graves said, his face impassive. "All of them. They took their things before dawn. They forfeited their wages." "Left? On Christmas?" "They said they would not spend another night in this house, madam. They said the house is unwell." Eleanor pressed her handkerchief to her mouth. And my husband? In his study. He has not emerged. And my children? Master Alistair is in the dining room attempting to find breakfast. Miss Alara is in the great hall. She has been there for some time. Eleanor drifted toward the great hall, drawn by a morbid gravity. Alara was there, just as Graves had said. She was on her stool, staring at the Christmas tree. The room was freezing, the fire a pile of gray ash. "Alara, child, it's Christmas," Eleanor said, her voice a weak tremble. Alara turned, her face pale and composed. "So it is, Mother. Did you see the present it left us?" "Present? What do you mean, dear?" Alara pointed to the floor beneath the tree. Among the neatly wrapped boxes of cologne and books, there lay 3 small, gray, desiccated objects. Eleanor stepped closer. She squinted, then recoiled, stifling a scream. They were birds. 3 dead sparrows, their bodies dried and twisted, their eyes pecked out. "The house is so hungry, Mother," Alara whispered, a faint smile playing on her lips. "It's celebrating." Eleanor fled, her sobs echoing in the vast, cold hall. Alistair Blackwood was a modern man of 1913. He believed in motor cars, dividends, and the undeniable superiority of the English gentleman. He found his mother's hysterics and his father's grim silences to be tedious. The servant's leaving was an infernal nuisance, but hardly cause for the melodrama that had gripped the house. He found his mother weeping in the foyer, Graves standing by impassively. "Good Lord, Mother, pull yourself together. It's just a few dead birds. The cat probably brought them in." "We have no cat, Alistair," she wept. "It was her. She said the house did it. Oh, tosh," Alistair snapped. "Alara is being peculiar to get attention, as always, and you encourage her." He adjusted his silk dressing gown. "Now, Father has locked himself in the study, and you're useless. I suppose I shall have to find that photographer fellow myself. This entire portrait debacle is the root of the problem." "No, Alistair, don't go," Eleanor cried, grabbing his arm. "Don't leave me alone. The house, it's watching." "You're drugged," he said, pulling his arm away gently. "Go lie down. I'll handle Father." He strode to the study and banged on the door. "Father, open this door. Mother is in a state and it's Christmas Day. This is absurd." The door was unlocked. Arthur Blackwood was sitting at his desk, staring at a blank ledger. He looked as if he had aged 10 years. "Alistair," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "Father, what is this?" "You're frightening, Mother. It's just a blasted photograph." "It is not the photograph, Alistair," Arthur said, looking up, his eyes hollow. "It is what the photograph showed." "What?" "That Finch fellow," said. Alara blinked. "He's retaking it. What is the mystery?" Arthur hesitated. He could not tell his son. The heir. The future of the Blackwood line. He could not taint him with this poison. "It is a private business matter, Alistair. Finch attempted to defraud me. It is settled. Now go. See to your sister." "See to Alara? Why? She's the one who's—" "See to your sister," Arthur roared, slamming his fist on the desk. "Go. Sit with her. Talk to her. Act like a family." Alistair, stunned by his father's outburst, backed out of the room. He was annoyed, but also, for the first time, uneasy. His father was not a man given to emotional displays. He found Alara where his mother had left her, by the tree. The dead birds were gone. "Well, Alara," he said, forcing a jovial tone, "you've managed to send the entire house into a panic. Bully for you." She looked up at him. "Hello, Alistair. Did you sleep well?" "Like a stone," he lied. He had been cold all night, too. "Listen, what did you tell Mother about dead birds?" "They were a gift from the house to celebrate the day." "Right. And I suppose the house is Father Christmas, is it?" "Stop this nonsense, Alara. It's cruel. Mother is terrified." "She should be," Alara said simply. "We all should. It's almost time." "Time for what?" "Time for this morbid play-acting to end." Alara stood up. She was 16, but she suddenly seemed taller, older. She walked over to him, the fabric of her dress whispering. She reached up and placed her cold hand on his cheek. "You're so blind, brother. she whispered, and the smell of stale lilies washed over him. You see, but you don't observe. You're just like Father. You only believe what's in the ledger. And what should I believe? He asked, trying to keep the tremor from his voice. That we are not alone, that we were never alone, and that the picture, the first picture, told the truth. We are not the family, Alistair. We are the feast. Alistair recoiled, pushing her hand away. You're mad. You're utterly, completely mad. He turned and strode from the room, but his skeptical bravado was gone, replaced by a cold, crawling fear. He suddenly remembered the stories. The family who had lived here before them. The ones who had built the house. The ones who, in the winter of 1840, had vanished. All of them, without a trace. Christmas morning found Alistair Finch in his studio, printing. He had destroyed the first negative, as instructed. He had shattered the glass with a hammer, gathered the shards, and dissolved them in a bath of nitric acid until nothing remained but a toxic, swirling sludge, which he poured into the gutter. Now, he was printing the second negative. The good negative. The one where Alara's eyes were normal, and the wallpaper was just wallpaper. He produced a flawless print. It was, technically, the finest work of his career. The tones were perfect. The composition was classical. It was a portrait of a proud, stable, wealthy family. It was a complete and utter lie. He knew it. He knew that what his camera had first captured was the truth. His camera, his machine of science, had seen past the facade of velvet and wool and captured the screaming, hungry void beneath. And he had destroyed the evidence. He wrapped the print, his hand stained with chemicals. He had to deliver it. He had to finish this. He arrived at Shadowbrook Manor at noon. The house was dead silent. The snow on the drive was undisturbed, save for his own footprints. There was no smoke from the chimneys. He knocked. The sound was flat, absorbed by the stone. He waited. No one came. He knocked again, harder, using the heavy iron ring. "Mr. Blackwood, I have the portrait." He tried the handle. The massive oak door was unlocked. It swung open with a low groan onto the frigid, dark entryway. "Hello?" Finch called out. His voice was small. The house was colder inside than out. The air was still, and it carried that smell. The lilies, sweet and rotten. "Mr. Blackwood?" He walked toward the great hall, his boots loud on the parquet. He was clutching the wrapped photograph like a shield. He entered the hall. The fire was dead ash. The great Christmas tree stood dark, its tinsel and ornaments looking garish in the gray light from the windows. The family was there. They were arranged exactly as he had posed them for the photograph. Arthur standing center, Eleanor on the settee, Alistair behind his father, Alara on her stool. "Mr. Blackwood," Finch said, his voice trembling. I have the print." They did not move. "Sir?" Finch took a step closer. They were not looking at him. They were all staring forward, at the wall where the portrait would hang. Arthur's eyes were wide, his mouth open in a silent order. Eleanor clutched her handkerchief, her face a mask of frozen terror. Alistair's expression of boredom had been replaced by one of raw, primal shock, his eyes fixed on something just above Finch's head. And Alara. Alara was smiling, her faint, placid, knowing smile. They're frozen," Finch whispered. He reached out a trembling hand to touch Arthur's shoulder. His hand did not meet wool. It met stone. He snatched his hand back, crying out. They were not people. They were statues, cold, hard, and gray. He touched Eleanor's face. It was like marble, and so cold it burned his skin. No, no, no. He looked at Alara, her smiling stone face. Her eyes, though carved from the same gray material, seemed to follow him. He heard a sound above him, a dry, skittering sound, the sound of 1,000 brittle legs moving in the darkness of the ceiling. He looked up. The shadows in the high corners of the room were shifting. They were thick, and they were dripping, coalescing into a shape, a vast, multi-limbed darkness that was unfolding itself like a spider. The smell of lilies was suffocating. He turned and ran. He fled the great hall, dropping the perfect photograph on the floor. He ran through the foyer, past the silent, watching cherubs on the staircase, and burst out of the front door, falling into the snow. He scrambled to his feet and ran down the drive, never once looking back at the house that hunched against the gray sky, a house that had finally, after a long wait, enjoyed its Christmas feast. Finch did not stop running until he reached the town. He went straight to the constable, a man named Miller, and babbling, incoherent, told him of the family in the great hall. They're dead, or statues, frozen. The house, it's in the walls. Constable Miller, a pragmatic man, attributed Finch's hysteria to holiday spirits or artistic temperament. But the Blackwoods were the most important family in the county. He had to investigate. He assembled a party of 3 men. They rode to Shadowbrook, Finch refusing to go with them, sitting instead in the station, wrapped in a blanket, shaking. The constables were gone for 3 hours. When Miller returned, his face was pale and grim. "What did you find?" Finch asked, leaping to his feet. "Nothing," Miller said, his voice heavy. "What?" "But the family. In the hall. The statues. There's no one in the great hall, Mr. Finch. No one at all. But the furniture, the tree. The tree is there. The furniture. The fire is ash. And this," he said, holding up the tissue-wrapped package. "This was on the floor. Your photograph." "They're gone," Finch whispered. They vanished?" "It would appear," Miller said, "that the entire family, Mr. Blackwood, his wife, the 2 children, and the butler Graves, have all departed, packed their bags and left. Their bedrooms are cleared of all personal effects. The kitchen is scrubbed. There's nothing there." "No," Finch insisted. "That's not what happened. They were there. They were stone. And the thing in the ceiling. The shadows." "There are no shadows, Mr. Finch," Miller said, his voice hardening. "There is only an empty house. And you, seen fleeing it, raving like a madman. Now, unless you have a better explanation, I suggest you go home. Perhaps you found the house empty, and your imagination did the rest." "The plate," Finch said suddenly. "The other plate. The first one. You told me you destroyed it." "I lied. I mean, I don't know." Finch ran from the station, back to his studio. He tore it apart. He emptied the chemical chest. He looked for the cloth-wrapped shards, for the acid bath. There was no acid bath. The chest was tidy. There were no shards. And in the drying rack, where the good negative should have been, there was nothing. He scrambled to his printing station. The print he had made, the perfect one, it was gone. The only copy was the one Miller had found, which was now in the constable's office. It was as if his entire encounter with the Blackwoods, the sittings, the darkroom terrors, had been wiped clean. He was left with only one piece of evidence: his appointment book. The entry for December 23, 1913, read, "Blackwood, Shadowbrook, 4 p.m., Christmas portrait." The Blackwood family was declared missing in January 1914. The manor was sealed. The story became a local legend, a ghost story to tell at Christmas. The photographer, Mr. Finch, became a recluse. His business failed. He was known as the man who saw ghosts, and he died alone in 1922, muttering about shadows and hungry houses. The photograph Mr. Finch had delivered, the perfect one, became evidence. It was filed away in the Bramford Constabulary Archives. Item number 44B. Blackwood disappearance. It was a high-quality 8x10 print mounted on heavy card, depicting a stern but normal family. Constable Miller looked at it often in that first year. He saw nothing amiss, just a family. Years passed. The Great War came and tore the world apart. The memory of the Blackwoods faded, becoming just another unsolved file. Miller retired. A new, younger constable took his place. In 1925, a young forensic photographer from London was visiting the Bramford station, demonstrating new techniques. He was shown the Blackwood file as a local curiosity. "A whole family vanished," the new constable said. "The only thing left was this picture. The photographer who took it went round the bend." The London photographer picked up the print. He was a man used to looking at images, to finding details others missed. "It's a fine print," he said, admiring the technical quality. A magnesium flash by the look of it. Good depth. A bit stiff, but that was the style. He pulled a small, powerful magnifying loupe from his waistcoat pocket. Mind if I... Be my guest. The photographer, whose name was Thomas, leaned over the desk and placed his loupe on the print. He examined the faces one by one. Stern fellow, the father. Wife looks terrified. The son, arrogant, standard portrait. Then he moved the loupe to the girl, Ilara. Hello, Thomas murmured. That's odd. What is? The constable asked, leaning in. The girl, her eyes. Look at the catchlights. What about them? They're just the reflection of the flash. No, not quite, Thomas said, his eye pressed to the loupe. They're sharp, perfectly done. But look, just beside the left pupil. There. It looks, for all the world, like the photographer painted it on. Painted? Why would he do that? To hide something, Thomas murmured, fascinated. He moved the loupe away from her eyes, scanning the rest of her face, her dress, her hands. He zoomed in on her right hand, the one resting on the settee. Good God, he whispered. What? The constable demanded, getting nervous. What is it? Thomas looked up, his face pale. This isn't a family portrait, Constable. What are you talking about? The girl's hand, Thomas said, tapping the print. The one on the armrest. Go on, look. The constable took the loupe. He fumbled with it, then focused on the spot. At first he saw nothing, just her white hand. But as his eye adjusted, he saw what Thomas meant. She had been posed with her hand resting lightly on the dark velvet. But the photograph, under magnification, showed something else. Her fingers were sunk into the armrest, not just pressing down. They were inside it, as if the solid horsehair-stuffed wood and velvet were soft clay, and her fingers had submerged into it, up to the knuckle. The constable dropped the loupe. That's impossible. It's a trick. A shadow. It's not a shadow, Thomas said, his voice quiet. Look at the focus. The shadow is sharp. The indentation is clear. Her fingers are in the wood. He moved the loupe again, this time to the background, to the wallpaper behind Arthur Blackwood. And this, he said, this is impossible. Under the lens, the damask pattern, which at a glance looked normal, was revealed. It was not a floral pattern. It was a mass of writhing, distorted, screaming faces. The same faces Finch had seen on the first, destroyed negative. The good negative, the one Finch had printed, hadn't been good at all. He had been so relieved to see Ilara's eyes were normal that he had failed to check the rest of the plate. He had failed to see that the horror had simply spread. The constable and Thomas stared at the photograph, the silence of the archive room heavy around them. This is chicanery, the constable said, but his voice lacked conviction. The photographer, Finch, he was a known eccentric. He must have manipulated the negative as a prank. This is not a prank, Thomas said. He was still studying the print. This level of negative manipulation, painting in shadows, altering patterns, adding indentations, it would take weeks of work. It would be visible to the naked eye. But this is seamless. The grain is consistent. The light is perfect. This is what the camera saw. He moved the loupe one last time, to the far left of the frame, where a small brass candlestick sat on a side table. It was polished to a high sheen. In 1913, it would have reflected the room perfectly. The reflection, Thomas breathed. He focused the loupe on the curved, distorted reflection in the brass. What? The constable asked, not wanting to look. In the reflection, Thomas said, his voice shaking, you can see the photographer, Mr. Finch. He's there, standing by his camera, just as he should be. So? It's normal. No, Thomas said, pulling back from the loupe, his face ashen. He's not alone. Look. The constable looked. He saw the tiny, warped image of Finch and his camera, and he saw what was standing next to him. Reflected in the brass, standing just behind Alistair Blackwood but invisible in the main portrait, was a thing. It was tall, impossibly thin, and draped in shadows. It had no face, only a pale, smooth oval, and its long skeletal arms were resting on Alistair's shoulders, as if presenting him. And the rest of the family, In the reflection, they were not looking at the camera. They were all turned, smiling their rigid smiles, looking at the tall, dark thing that stood among them, all except Alara. In the reflection, as in the photo, she was staring straight ahead, straight at the lens, smiling. The constable locked the photograph back in its evidence box. He and Thomas never spoke of what they had seen. The box was transferred to a county archive in 1930 and was eventually lost in a fire during the 1940s. The story would have ended there. A lost file, a burned photograph. But Arthur Blackwood had lied to Finch. Finch had not destroyed the first negative. Blackwood had taken it. He had told Finch to destroy it, but in the darkroom, in that moment of shared terror, he had palmed the true negative, the one with the black pit eyes and the screaming wallpaper, and had left Finch with the good one. He had needed the evidence. He had needed to study it, to understand what was happening to his family, to his house. He never got the chance. The house took him that night. The glass plate negative wrapped in cloth remained hidden in his study desk. It was overlooked by the constables who were looking for signs of a hasty departure, not a hidden photographic plate. The house sat empty for decades. In 1955, the contents of Shadowbrook Manor were finally auctioned off. The house was deemed structurally unsound, tainted by its local legend, and was slated for demolition. A collector of photographic oddities, a woman named Ms. Evelyn Grant, bought a crate of miscellaneous office supplies for £2. At the bottom of the crate, beneath rusted nibs and dried inkwells, she found the cloth-wrapped 8x10 glass plate. She took it back to her flat in London. She was a historian of the medium. She recognized the emulsion, the cut of the glass. Circa 1910-1920, she estimated. She held it up to her window. It was a family portrait. Stern, dark faces staring back at her from the past. "A bit gloomy, aren't we?" she murmured. She was documenting her new acquisitions that night. She placed the negative on her light box, a modern convenience, and switched it on. The image glowed. She leaned in, adjusting her spectacles to read the label Finch had pasted on the edge. Blackwood, 231213. Plate 1. She, like Finch, like Blackwood, was a person of detail. She grabbed her own magnifying glass to inspect the quality. She saw the family. She saw the father, the mother, the son, and she saw the daughter. She saw the two perfect, black, lightless voids where her eyes should be. Evelyn Grant felt a thrill, the chill of true, inexplicable discovery. She moved the glass, examining the wallpaper. She saw the screaming faces. She saw the skeletal arms in the damask. This was not a flawed plate. This was a masterpiece of the impossible. She spent the entire night with it, zooming in, as she called it, on every millimeter of the 8x10 surface. She found things neither Finch nor Blackwood had lived long enough to see. In the dark shadows beneath the settee, she found what looked like a pile of small, gray, desiccated things. In the carved newel post of the banister, visible in the background, the weeping cherub wasn't weeping. It was laughing, its mouth carved into a rictus grin. In the reflection of Arthur Blackwood's own polished shoe, she did not see the floor. She saw a pair of wide, white eyes, staring up from the black leather. Evelyn was not afraid. She was fascinated. She had found her holy grail. A true spirit photograph, captured not by a fraudulent medium, but by a high-end professional. Evelyn Grant became the world's foremost expert on the Blackwood plate. She never sold it. She kept it in a climate-controlled safe. She wrote papers. She gave lectures to small, skeptical audiences, but she never, ever allowed it to be reproduced. A photograph of a photograph, she would say, is a dilution. You must see the object itself. You must see the silver on the glass. She grew old with the plate. She would take it out on Christmas Eve, her own private ritual, and look at it under her strongest magnifier. She felt she had come to know the family, or at least the things that wore their faces. It is 1978. Evelyn is an old woman. Her hands are gnarled with arthritis, but she is steady. She places the plate on her light box. The room is dark, save for its glow. "Hello again, my dears," she whispers to the dark faces. She leans in with her loupe, her breath fogging the glass. She's looking at Ilara, at those terrible, lovely, empty eyes. She has looked at them 1,000 times. They are flat. They are pits. They are unchanging. Tonight she zooms in, focusing as tightly as her old eyes will allow. She stares, and she stares. And in the silent, dark room, in the dead of winter, Evelyn Grant sees the silver halide in the left-hand pit shift. It is not a blink. It is not movement. It is a slow swirling, like dark water circling a drain. She pulls back, her heart hammering. Impossible. My eyes. The light. She leans in again, forcing her eye to focus. The loop presses hard against the glass. The swirling is faster now. And from the center of the black void, from the absolute blackness of the emulsion, a tiny pinprick of white light appears. Not a reflection, a light from within. It is, she thinks, in her last moment of rational thought, beautiful. Then the light flares, brighter and brighter, until it is a blinding white. When the police find Evelyn Grant 2 days later, she is sitting at her desk, dead. The coroner rules it a simple heart failure. She is an old woman after all. The light box is still on. The blackwood plate is still on it. The young constable assigned to the case logs the items. He picks up the negative. Just an old photo, he says. He holds it up. He sees a stern, cold family, a father, a mother, a son, a daughter. He squints. The daughter, Ilara, her eyes are perfectly normal, gray, clear, with tiny sharp catchlights. And in the background, the wallpaper is just flowers. The constable shrugs, logs it as antique glass negative no value, and places it in an evidence box. The box is sent to a storage warehouse where it sits, undisturbed. But the staff who work the late shift in that aisle, where the cold seems to settle, sometimes report a faint smell. Like lilies, they say. Sweet and rotten. And sometimes they hear a sound from inside the sealed box. A faint, dry skittering, as if something, after a very long, very patient wait, is finally and hungrily waking up.